checking in from downtown Chicago, sunny downtown Chicago. This is a conversation I had with Dr. Perry Burnett, again from a Very Perry Conversation. We mentioned a mutual friend, Dr. Austin Maxheimer, and the three of us actually sat down on the first Sunday of April 2024, talk about rituals that we have experienced together, as well as men's retreats. And it's something that I wanted to get out sooner rather than later, and hopefully that'll be apparent as it goes. Not a lot of edits in this one, not a lot of video clips interspersed throughout. Just wanted to sort of get it out there more quickly, and had to sacrifice that in the meantime. So hopefully you enjoy a Zach Austin Perry conversation about rituals and retreats.
Apparently the tickets for the Valentine's Day show was on the 13th, the night before.
Wait, this is this year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that would have been the night that I texted you guys about giving up atheism for Lent. That would have been Marty Party Rock.
Yeah.
Like the overlap between Valentine's. And that's also my daughter Reese's birthday.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like this, the whole thing with Lent and Valentine's Day, because I went to see Jordan Peterson on Valentine's Day in St. Louis, and then that was when I was tweeting with Jordan Hall, and Jessica was listening to that whole thing. Like, it all sort of really ramped up in this one intense period.
Yeah.
So you guys did end up getting to go,
Then we went on a date night with a couple friends, and
like they wouldn't let you in because it wasn't the
it wasn't
experience.
happening. It was
you would have had to just participate in
mass. Yeah, it was not the candlelight service or concert, but we did go a couple weeks month later, and it was good. Highly recommended as date night.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah.
All right, so people probably know who you are.
That looks like it's off still.
It's not. Okay. I'm looking at it. It's right at you. Point at it again, and people will think
Is this at you?
Is this at me?
Yeah,
that's at you.
Yeah, that's at you.
Looks like it's. I know. That's what I was thinking about that one.
Okay, that one's at me.
Well,
trust the director.
Trust
the director.
Trust your
It's
director
all
of cinematography
fine.
here, and editor, and all that kind of stuff. So I did a conversation with Perry on the week that Open Table takes a week off. So you are the Austin that was referred to in our conversation that invited us
That's
in
right.
to Open Table.
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about. We'll learn about you, but tell us a little about the history of Open Table.
Are we starting?
Yeah, we're starting. So.
Okay, sorry.
I'll edit that part out.
No, you can keep it in.
We'll keep it in. It's raw.
Yeah. Okay. I am engaged.
You need to pee again.
No.
We can pause
I'm
that.
good. I'm good.
So you invited us to Open Table. We have a history together that we'll get into, and we thought it would be interesting to discuss sort of the different ways that church has intersected in all of our lives together, as well as just rituals. And but let's start with church, because today is Sunday. You've already participated in a church experience, and so you kind of do church 2 times a Sunday, like at least.
At least, yeah. No, so I attend and serve at One Life West in Evansville, Indiana, and,
which is the same church that Brett started.
It was on here.
Yep.
Yes. And I serve on a team there. We make music together, which is, besides the fact that I have 14 years of relationship with that congregation. Also, that's the thing that keeps me rooted there, is the opportunity to make music, which is like one of the most collective, effervescent things that I could do, and like getting in flow state. That's always so enjoyable. Got there this morning, even those sorts of things. Not every time, but most times. And just the opportunity to make music with people is something I always wanted to do ever since I was like a young man who fell in love with Nirvana Unplugged as an 8th grader. Like, I've always wanted to make music with people. And so that keeps me there. But I'm also part of a church plant called Open Table Church on the south side, where I now live, do neighborhood work. And I want to experience that with my brothers. And so I invited you guys to that experience as well.
And for people who don't No, Evansville, sort of a familiarity with the South Side. Can you paint like a quick picture of sort of what the South Side is like, and then also maybe a little bit about the Potter's Wheel as the sort of locale for Roundtable as well?
Yeah, so the South Side is like, if you could imagine a lot of communities. I grew up in rural Illinois, so even in a small 2,000 town, village, there was always that place you didn't go, right? Like that side of town in that small rural town is actually literally on the other side of the train tracks. So the South Side has this reputation for like the place that has had disinvestment, high poverty rates, high level of dilapidated abandoned houses, that sort of thing. But really, it's I would say, preview into my life, it's a completely false narrative. A lot of that is like systemic racism issues. It's high, it's 60% minority community, whereas like here where Honeymoon West is, it's 6% minority.
Wow.
So if you think about the differences, you can start to paint a picture of how that neighborhood got to the way it was, and that doesn't happen randomly. It happens through intentional ways to take wealth from minority communities and things like that. But anyways, we moved there 5 years ago on the South Side, and it was so beautiful because it just completely broke down my paradigms, as things do when you get proximate to things. But yeah, it's just a neighborhood that has experienced, or an area of our city that has experienced what many in urban centers do, is that downtown used to be strong. As development spread to the outskirts, disinvestment happened in the city core. And so some of the things that you hear, failing schools, bad infrastructure, dilapidated housing stock, higher poverty rates, those things are true of the community, but they're not the whole story or even the best part of the story, or even, we want to think about these neighbors are the assets and beauty of our city, just like everywhere else. And so Potter's Wheel started as a ministry to reach out to by people motivated by their faith to bring food and clothing, classic mercy ministry type things for those church folks that know Matthew 25, and there's the Great Commission in Matthew 28, but then there's a Great Compassion in 25. People of Christian faith have always been motivated to care for their neighbors that are experiencing poverty and need. And so Potter's Wheel was started in that vein, and it's continued as a ministry for 20 years, and it's been under new leadership for the last few, and they've really shifted to a different kind of approach, which we could talk about more. But some of the people that have rallied around that space also wanted to have a worshiping community in there, and it's like 3 blocks from my house, and so I can ride my bike or walk there, so it's really nice. It's in the ministry where I do neighborhood revitalization. And so it's just an opportunity to try to do a walkable experience of life, live, work, play, worship, all in the same community.
And even though Perry and I don't live there, you still felt and got the blessing, and we felt welcome. It was appropriate for you to invite us, to be a part of that as well.
Yes, yeah.
So now maybe we can go into a little bit more of why you thought we would be into something like that, knowing a little bit about our journeys, because we haven't had this conversation yet, I don't think. Why did you invite us to that?
Yeah. Well, for number one is, I'll say I'm a chronic inviter. So I'm an extroverted type of person, and I like people to experience what I'm experiencing. And I like when I think about the people in life that are my relationships, where I want them to experience what I'm experiencing. You guys are up there at the very top of the list, not to mention, which we will get into, the things we have experienced together. And so you mentioned, previously when I knew both of you through different avenues, and I was like, we've got to spend time together, the three of us. And so this is just an extension of that original concept of our friendship. Is like, I just want to spend as much time with you guys as I can. Now, of course, life, jobs, careers, social things get in the way of that at times. But beyond just wanting to spend time with you guys, just period, we had kind of circled around this idea of experiencing kind of transcendent, or maybe not anti-transcendent, values, these core values that humanity can experience together, these commonalities like love is the classic one, or beauty, or whatever. But all of that was born out of kind of Perry's thought child, in my opinion, of wanting to create a community of people that may not be associated with the Christian faith specifically, but we can maybe rally around this concept of love and experience it together, or beauty and experience it together. And we might come to that focal point in different ways or through different means, but a community of non-faith maybe that rallies around these experiences together. And so Open Table Church, while very much explicitly rallying around Christianity, isn't like your Sunday-centric Western classic church. It really is.
Although ironically, it does take place right in the center of Sunday.
Yeah,
it's a
true,
lunch thing,
True. And that's more cultural. We're in the Bible Belt, and people have Sunday mornings blocked out. So it's just like the ease of gathering multiple people. If we were on the West Coast, East Coast, we probably wouldn't do Sunday morning.
Sure.
Anyways, but yeah, so the faith community was trying to think about how it might be more participatory, more dialogue, more communal oriented. And so I was like, while it may not be in the exact sweet spot of my friends' post-Christian expression of their life, it's maybe a closer paradigm or expression than we've experienced before. And so I was like, let's see if they'll come and give it a whirl, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. What's going on for you as he's describing this, and maybe some of the genesis of what he pitched as your, thought child?
Yeah, it was, at least in my understanding, it came from your overflow of what you had been learning and experiencing through rituals and like transformative experiences and those types of things.
So for
what brought you into that? No. No, definitely not Open Table. Like, what was the genesis of you getting into these kind of ritualistic, transformative experiences and wanting to gather people around them?
Yeah, so personal transformation, right, was all about, I am in higher education, which is it's designed for personal transformation. And so religion is in the same industry of personal transformation.
Yeah.
And so I've always been interested in personal transformation. And so, it was the idea of rituals came out of, how do we engage in actual personal transformation? And that's where it was born out of, I guess, was the desire to myself experience, right, these higher and higher states of being. Right, was to progress, to leave my old self behind, and it was, seeking the wisdom of, the history of all these people who have engaged in this, and why am I not experiencing it?
So you're reading this, you're researching it, like you've got your kind of academic brain on, which you have on a lot of it. You bring it to every aspect of you. So you're reading and researching it, and then you're like, how do I practice this? How do I participate in this? And are you thinking you need to go out and create it?
So again, it comes out of maybe the previous talk where the old model was a bullseye model, and the center of that model was a person, right? In the postmodern world, or in a post-postmodern world, you're not going to have an absolute truth, right? There's no person I'm going to follow whose image of God I'm going to conform to. So if I'm going to gather as a religious community, what's going to be the center of that religious community? It can't be doctrine, right? Doctrine can no longer be the center of church because we all disagree on doctrine. There's many different kinds of doctrine. Doctrine is divisive.
Or as a preview into my dissertation work was, or we can all agree on it, and it still doesn't matter. Like you can have everyone can assent to
because of the
concepts.
audience aspect as well. Yes, mentally
they get mentally can assent to concepts,
agree to
it
concepts.
Has no transformative bearing on their life.
Right.
And one of the things that struck me that you helped educate me on was the fact that for literally thousands of years, humanity participated in these rituals, these moments of like moving as a 13-year-old, from childhood to manhood and like all these things. But it's only been the last 100 or 200 where we've completely disassociated from these,
Right. Even
transformative
so,
moments.
here's an interesting historical fact as well. We typically think that the way civilization or society formed was because first we had nomadic.
Watch out for
Yeah,
Ted. They'll come get
he'll
you.
give you some inspiration.
We had nomads, and then those nomads kind of learned how to cultivate the seed. The seed produced agricultural, which allowed people to stay in a centralized location. Then they got together to form society, and church then kind of formed after society formed. However, some recent archaeological evidence, I think it's called the Göbekli Tepe. Yeah. So Göbekli Tepe actually was found, I think, 12,000 BCE, right?
That's when it was found, or that's when
That's
it was
when
found to be.
that was when it was found to be dated, which was like
recent.
yeah, exactly. which was basically 2,000 years before any kind of society or civilization around agriculture. So what they're believing now is that actually the temple was the first thing that actually formed society. So these nomads would come together to worship. They would come together to engage in sacrifice. They would come together to engage in these human needs of socialization, of values, to participate in these values. And then because of all these individuals coming together, or these groups of people, they would then share seed. So seed actually was the result of coming together to worship. And then after the socialization, then society, or agricultural formed, then civilization formed after that. So the church, right, if you will, or the religious community was actually the foundation for society, and is the foundation for society. Right? We lose this idea of gathering together to share values.
Yeah.
Right? We lose civilization.
I think so. Where I learned this from first was Brian Murarescu in his book Immortality Key, and his research into the Göbekli Tepe, totally butchering the name probably, but I know we're talking about the same thing. Was also talking about the types of brews that were created from these farmers that were sort of sharing, like, hey, try this. This will get you jacked up. And but that's sort of the same thing that he found as well. It was like this. It was the rituals. It was participating in something together that connected people. Maybe created the trust bonds that allowed them to say, okay, maybe we can do more together from here.
Right. And so I guess we can jump into that aspect of how that happens.
Well, yeah, because I think what would be interesting to remember together is like, what was the first thing? So we had like conversations over coffee, and like
for a couple of years we were trying to
talk is cheap, though, right? Like we're spinning our wheels a little bit. We enjoy spending time together, but it's like at some point, somebody's got to get naked. or some version it was married.
No, there was definitely a stake in the ground moment, I remember, and I think it was the timelines are a little checked up, but I believe it was coming. We had experienced the pandemic, right? Or
yes,
this pre-pandemic.
No, you're right. Okay, if you're going, okay, so keep going, and I can maybe confirm the timeline.
I think it was like maybe 18 and 19, we were having conversations about wanting to create. We really, one of the things that also brought us together, I feel like, is we really wanted not only to experience personal transformation, but we wanted to extend that to the community. We wanted to make an impact in the world, I feel like. And so I think for each of us that looked and was different. And so maybe that's why we never clicked that into place. But I remember.
I just want
go ahead.
You're right. And I think like you were sort of coming at it from a church perspective. You were coming at it from sort of your awareness of the students in your life and sort of seeing their sort of despair levels kind of drop down. And then mine was almost as an employer / adjunct faculty community member. You just sort of seeing like, man, people are disengaging and they're not necessarily getting better.
Yeah.
And
this was before COVID.
Yes. And so it was like, we're all sort of sensing this, like maybe if we can find something, we very much want to then share it with our community and invite other people to participate in it. We have to go first. That's what we'll do.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think Perry had been learning about rituals and things like that as well. So, but I feel like there was a stake in the ground moment during COVID when we were kind of emerging out of the complete lockdown and the scary time of that, whereas like things were loosening back up a little bit, and I feel like it was you. This might be a false memory, but I feel like Perry's like, I need to experience something. I need to do because I need to put my warrior bracelets on, and I need to do something in the world. Because even though Perry acts like he doesn't do things in the world because he's an academia, he does. But anyways,
so I remember the timeline now.
Yeah.
Because I was doing my podcast with WNIN about the pandemic.
Okay.
And that was about when we did like 3 conversations with people, and it took about 12 weeks for that whole thing to run its course. And by the end of May,
we were ready.
It was like, we were like, is lockdown going to end? And then the George Floyd, it happened, I think, first week of June.
Okay.
So it was like, or at least the world exploded in June. It was like, forget these lockdowns. We're hitting the streets. And then all of a sudden it was like that. I mean, it was June 2020, because I remember it was the summer solstice day.
Oh,
we
yeah.
on for the actual date of it.
That's
so
correct.
The longest day of the year. So I think sort of a combination of Perry saying, I'm ready, we need to do it, and me saying, okay, how about this date? It's somewhat special from a lunar and solar perspective, so let's go.
Yeah. So Perry built a ritual for us, or for himself, really, that we were then to be the witnesses of. So
yeah, so talk about that part of it, because you've talked about the witnessing thing in our last conversation over the years. Like, why was that important to you? Why not just have, you had rituals by yourself in your backyard, previous to this? Why was it important?
Or after that, and I realized it didn't work after the fact.
Oh, okay. So the one with us was the first one with witnesses, and then the juice wasn't there when you tried to do it solo.
Right.
Huh.
So, so I guess in my studying of rituals, I guess the first aspect of a ritual was to create a sacred space, or was to create a barriers to entry, right? In other words, you needed a sacred space, and that can be a building.
Yeah.
We did ours out into the wilderness, and a lot of men actually go to the wilderness to have rituals. So it's a very male aspect of rituals. They go into the wilderness.
And when we say wilderness, we mean wilderness.
There was no trail.
There was no trail. There was no clearing. There was lots of ticks
and spiders. So we pledged to do a 2-night adventure. So it was like we would have an evening together, and then we'd have a full day with no travel. It was like, we are here, and then one more night, and then return on.
Yeah, because Big Perry had built a whole process, a whole ritual weekend for that.
So first off, you create the barrier to entry, or the sacred space. Then, in order to have that sacred space be sacred, usually there is a negation or a prohibition within that space. Typically, it's don't, right? So to make something sacred, you don't do it, right? In other words, you don't speak the name of God, and because that makes it sacred. Same thing with cursing, right? Cursing works because it's prohibited. If you take a look at the research on cursing, right? Cursing has a fundamental social role to play. They've done some interesting studies on cursing.
No shit.
So, for example, psychologists have done some studies where you had 2 individuals put their hands in cold water, and they had individuals repeat words. So one of them was just repeating a common word, and the other one was repeating a curse word, just dropping F-bombs. And the person who was dropping F-bombs could withstand pain longer than the person who was just saying the common words over and over again. So the cursing allowed for you to withstand pain longer, which is why we curse when we have anxiety, because we're trying to bear the anxiety longer.
Or when we stub our toe.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I've seen maybe an inverse or opposite of that, of like the movie What the Bleep. You remember that's a very impactful movie for a lot of people. It was like trying to popularize quantum physics, but they could like look at the molecular structure of like water and other things like that, if you're like yelling and cursing at water, it turns into these like jagged things. But if you're speaking words of love, like these patterns of beauty emerge in it. So I think it's a little different.
Probably you should most of the time speak words of love,
Unless you're really,
but that's the
needing to
so
endure
curse.
pain.
Yeah, but because it's prohibited, it has power.
yeah.
Right, and so so you need
Okay.
something prohibited, right? Which is why we fasted beforehand.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
So-
that.
So
Right.
so you make something sacred by prohibiting something and then entering into a space that hasn't been blocked off, and no one is allowed into that space. So that's kind of the first stage of the ritual, was to create the sacred space, and it can be again on a certain time. For example, let's say tomorrow is the eclipse, right? There are thousands, I think hundreds of people getting married tomorrow.
Yeah.
Why? Because
I
it's-
interviewed one of them
Yeah.
for my podcast.
There you go. Because it is a sacred time, right? It is out of the ordinary. It is special. It is novel, right? So it's a sacred time to do something, and so that gives that power, right? People get married like on 1/1/1/1 or something like that, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, One Life started on 10/10/10.
There you go.
Yes, it did. My drummer in a church band this morning at One Life said he had heard that some people are going to try to conceive at the exact moment that the full
Quick,
eclipse-
honey, quick, come on, totality, totality, totality.
but yeah, the power. It'd be a special child. What's the window? It's like 30 seconds or 45
It's
seconds.
tight. It's tight. I mean, you gotta be.
I mean,
ready.
don't get me wrong. That's no problem for me. You know?
Okay.
That's longer than normal.
30 seconds. Come on.
What am I going to do with the
I'm
other
not a
15?
machine.
What am I going to do with the other 15? Anyways.
I think Barry was making a point.
Well, let's see. Yes. Okay. So
Negation.
yes. Okay. Yeah. So you're making it sacred versus the profane in parts by not doing something.
Okay.
Right? So you're creating a sacred space by negation of some kind. And so that's what we did. We went out into the woods, right? We fasted. We went and created a space out there in the middle of the woods. And then I guess the second stage essentially is going to be, I guess it's the stepping into the liminal space. So it's kind of, you're creating a liminal space out there, right? You don't know what time it is. You haven't eaten, whatever it is, and so you're creating a liminal space.
Would it be fair to say that liminal space is a space of becoming? Like,
So it's
the in between.
yes, so it's an in between space.
Something is
where
going to
you're not-
happen in there.
Yeah, well, you're
preparing.
Yeah, so you're not what you were, but
Yeah.
you're not yet what you
are.
will be.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. The space of becoming.
Yes,
Yeah.
space in between. It's a place of both and.
Yeah.
Right there's a lot of binary oppositions which are collapsing and invading that space.
The sort of like world that I've been in for the last 5 or 6 years with people on YouTube, downstream of Jordan Peterson, some call that the liminal web. So that's like a term that's sort of been used to
like
capture.
data real.
Yeah, all those people,
Yeah.
they're a part of the liminal web.
Okay.
It's stuck for some, apparently not for me, other than having you bring it into right now. But the
Okay.
web of becoming,
Yeah. Ugh.
that sounds like a Spider-Man spinoff or something.
So yeah, so you can create it. We went to the woods to create the space, but you can create it on Sunday morning or often, in terms of music, right? So the whole idea of music, right, is to have a central focus of attention, right? You're engaging in, this is Randall Collins' work, right, of rhythmic entrainment. So everyone's saying the same thing, repeating the same words. Chants work in that same way to create that space.
When I was at the Orthodox Church, there was a rhythmic aspect of them read. I was like, do you even understand what you're reading? Didn't matter. It was like,
Yeah.
we are participating in this way by speaking in this way.
Right. And so,
I've heard, I've been to synagogue, and it's like so much more beautiful when they read the Old Testament because they're speaking in Hebrew, which is sing-songy speaking. And it's just reading the text sounds like a chant or music. It's beautiful.
yeah. So you can do it in a lot of different ways to kind of create that. And again, within that bodily co-presence, so you need people in a presence. It works better if you have an increase in density. The higher the density, the better it functions.
What do you mean by density? Like the number of people, or it's close?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's better to have. Yes, exactly. So it is better to have a lot of people in a small space, and packed in there. You're bumping into each other, right? You're if it's too open, you feel disconnected. Yes, which is why when I go to concerts, I have to go to a concert, such as Lorna Shore or Tala, to throw those up there. You have to go to one that has the mosh pit. You've got to go to the one where you are just in a crowd of people, and you cannot tell the difference between your hand and the next person's hand, and your body and the next person's body.
That's why I love fish shows.
Yeah,
the noodle dancing, baby. Yeah,
the music is in training everybody to have that same focus of attention. So we've got that which creates that collective effervescence in part, but which is the symbolic order. So in other words, the idea of the collective effervescence is it's the presence of God. So all of a sudden we're invoking the presence of God, or the symbolic order. So you have to have the symbolic order or the presence of God present in order to have a ritual to occur. Because that's when the next stage is, after you have the liminal space there, right? You've got to disrupt people to get into that liminal space. So you need someone to step out into that liminal space, right? That's where the action comes in. Someone enters the circle, right? Enters the void, right? So we've created the liminal space. You've got the ritual elders on the outside. Someone has to enter into that space at that time, right? That space has been operated. And then when that person enters that space, there's got to be a disruption of that person. So that person has to disrupt themselves in some way.
So now I'm totally back. I'm there. I'm back at the campfire. Like, so you had prepared us for this. You sort of called us to be these elders, these protectors of the space. I mean, there's nobody for miles. Like we have not seen or heard a soul this whole time. So like we're there. We are sharing an experience together. And let's be as specific as you feel comfortable about this ritual where you disrupted yourself. You've gotten us to this point to where we're protecting the liminal space and kind of waiting for you to make the next move of disrupting yourself.
Yeah.
So classic ways to disrupt yourself, and I'll get to my specific one: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Right? That's why those things are so popular, because they're ways for people to disrupt themselves. Now, typically, the way that sex, drugs, and rock and roll work isn't a ritualistic space, right? And that's why it creates personal chaos, right? And can be very destructive, because
you don't have elders,
people don't have elders. And there's not a center of, there's not a value set. There's probably still a value set at some level, but there's not elders who are protecting the space.
That reminds me of all the research that's been done lately on psilocybin and the hero dose, and they have sitters and people watching over the person.
Right. So the elders who are watching the space and protecting the space while the person is in a disruptive state.
Yeah.
So there's not just
very different than the experience I had with mushrooms as a young man, where I just did them to consume things and have a good time.
Right. It wasn't a ritualistic way of doing it. You were
They were working on breaking through into whatever.
So there's a lot of ways, again. So to disrupt yourself, we can do it again. I know you do a lot of this is breath work, right? So breath work is a disruptive way of engaging in that holotropic breath work or other kinds of breath work. There's a disruption in yourself with that. There is embarrassment, right? That's a classic one to experience social death. So the closer you get to death, right? You get disrupted, right? Because death is the ultimate disruptor. And so the closer you get there, you can get there socially, where it's embarrassment. You can get there physically through pain. So pain is a disruptor. Embarrassment, confession, is also a way of a personal disruption that occurs. So when you're in that space, right, and you're in that liminal space, there is that need to disrupt somehow. And so that's the breaking open. And so again, that's the vulnerability that happens. If you don't have that vulnerability, then there's no personal transformation, right? Because it's too guarded and you're too protected.
I don't mean to stop your flow here, but just very quickly, I think it'd be helpful to talk about the difference between a ceremony and a ritual, because I feel like that's key, the differentiation to what you're saying right now.
So yeah, in a ceremony, there's the audience that is just watching a person who is engaged in usually lots of words. So in rituals, there's very few words spoken. There's not many words at all spoken in a ritual. Whereas in a ceremony, there's lots of words that are spoken. Think of a graduation ceremony, these kinds of things. Lots of words spoken. There are token gestures, right? The person's not in a vulnerable state. You just walk across there. Here's your diploma. I mean, it can be partially transformative if I allow myself to be disrupted during that part. Yeah. But there's an audience. For that. Yeah, and those things aren't valueless, but they can just be these non-disruptive things that don't really change much in life. So there's lots of words. There's an audience. There is,
and that's what Sunday mornings have become in the Western Church, is a ceremony instead of a transformative ritualistic experience, which historically the reason why Christians gathered around the table for mass, literally 1600 years one church, and the purpose of that was this ritualistic experience around the mystery of the elements of the Lord's Supper.
Right, absolutely.
That was supposed to be more ritualistic and transformative than what I feel like now it is more of a ceremony.
Right. And then the Catholic Church tries to keep that a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, the center of the Catholic Church, right, is the Eucharist.
But it had become But it had become ceremonial over the years.
Yes. And again, I mean, you can personally invest in that, right? Especially with the transubstantiation, right, and the sacrifice that happens every Sunday, right? I mean, you can really go there and have a transformational experience, or you can go there and just have a ceremony, right? You can just have these things that are non-transformative, right? But yes, it's not necessarily designed around that personal transformation.
Yeah, it's how I can get into a flow state on a Sunday morning, like I just did, where a friend of mine comes and to talk to him afterwards, and he's like, I just was looking at what time I could go eat.
So again, that's the music can get us there, right? So the idea of maybe after, right, the collective effervescence, the Spirit of God is there, then you have the liminal space created. So instead of like all facing one direction, you have a circle, right? And then somebody enters into the circle, right? As opposed to somebody comes and stands and speaks lots of words, right? So you have some of the elements already there on Sunday morning that can work. But you don't have the next step, which is somebody entering into the space and then being disrupted, being vulnerable, something happening in that space. So you need somebody to enter into that space and be disrupted. So the way that I did it, right? So the way that we did it during that ritual was I got naked, right? It was I'm going to get naked and stand before God naked, right? I'm going to stand before the symbolic order. I'm going to stand before, in my sense, it was those the oppression of what I should be. So again, I felt lots of shame, and so I was trying to kind of deal with looking at myself in a negative way, experiencing shame. That I'm a terrible person, that I'm bad. There's nothing good in me, and in part, again, that came out of my negative religious history. God, as I used to look up when I first became a Christian, and look up and just see the stars and see the face of God smiling at me, and eventually that turned into looking up and seeing God hate me. And looking down at God hating me, because if I really was a true Christian, I wouldn't be doing some of the things that I was still doing. And then that I couldn't stop doing those kinds of things. And
there's so many like dots there connecting in my mind right now about like Brene Brown's research on shame, and she did her whole like the overcoming shame, this old vulnerability. I'll never forget her doing it. It's such a powerful moment for being like, this is the sign language for vulnerability. It's just
Opening up in your heart.
Yeah. Just
opening
no to
your
nakedness.
clothes,
Yeah. And
She
then-
wasn't actually.
No.
Miming.
No, that would have been.
I missed
That was
TED Talk.
OnlyFans. That was the OnlyFans TED Talk.
Apologies for today.
Yeah, sorry. I think she would laugh at that. I hope. And then, like, all the way to the Garden of Eden, though, of like God being walking with us, and then at some point in that journey, it became, well, eating that, but became the oppressor that we had to hide from in our nakedness, and even killing animals to cover that shame. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so
Lots
so
of
that was for
connections
me was what I was that was the value of the ritual that I was trying to work through.
I think
Shame.
we were glad that you weren't also then requiring / fighting us into the same sort of thing. It was, I showed you mine. You show me yours.
But you did later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, that came later.
Yeah.
Not the same
Like,
way.
you modeled it for me, so I needed to eventually
good discipleship.
reciprocate. Yeah. Now, so let's see.
Yeah, I'm
Come on.
still covered. I haven't done the Brene.
The door's locked. We've got time.
Anyways, by the way, I also remember eating a bull's heart. So
yeah,
let's go back.
So, transition.
The ceremony or the ritual was not over.
Oh no.
No. And so so it was standing before the oppression. Standing before those who condemned me in a vulnerable way. I'm naked. Here I am. I'm not worthy. Right? I'm not good enough. So that was the part of the disruption. Was I'm not good enough. And then right within that liminal space, so somebody enters into that liminal space, they disrupt themselves in some way. And then there are two parts which are next. There's an action. There's symbolic action that needs to be taken. And then there is words that need to be spoken within that space. Typically, it's the action and then the words, but because the performative action is designed, so I had done a study which you guys know about a little bit, not a formal study yet. Hopefully, we'll get to maybe formalizing the study of taking a look at. I had people look at who is the godliest person that you know, and then I had to rate them on a bunch of values. Right, this person beholds these kind of values. And at the same time, I said, how often do they practice these kinds of behaviors? What actions do they take? Mm-hmm. And so I had correlated actions with values. So these values are associated with these actions, performing like factor analysis to kind of group them into these main pieces. So you don't have like thousands of them. You've got these 7 main actions and value sets that go back and forth. So if you want, so the idea was to flip it. Typically, we think that if I believe something, I will do something. So again, within the ritual, you're flipping it. You're doing something so that you can believe something. So we linked up, right? And we did this with the second ritual as well. We linked up the value sets, right? And we said, what values do we want to behold into what actions to take? And so the value at that time, I think, was courage for me. We were going for warrior in terms of the archetype. Mine was warrior at that point. And so it was courage. It was strength. Right? It was this. So therefore it was like, okay, what action am I going to take? And at that time I had just got done reading, I think it's William Robertson Smith's work on the religion of the Semites. And so in the religion of the Semites, typically we think sacrifice is something that I have to give up, right? It's like, okay, I've got to sacrifice it. Oh man. Right. And this is a negative thing. So I've got to give it up. I've got to sacrifice. I've got to lose something that is most valuable to me. And this is the typical way we think about sacrifice as a negative. And so when he goes back and he takes a look at the sacrificial system of the Semites or the Jews,
Consume it.
right? And so therefore, in the sacrificial system of the Jews, you gave up, your lamb. But when you gave up your lamb to be sacrificed, you then consumed it with the priests and with God. It was,
and of those in need,
and so it was a meal before Yahweh. And so one of the most intimate things you can do, look at the research in terms of intimacy groups. There is family, there is sexual partners, and then there is sharing a meal with somebody. That's how intimate sharing a meal is with somebody. It is one of the most intimate things that you can do. Which again, going back to open table, right? There's always a meal afterwards, which is where the intimacy usually occurs. And so it was the idea of sharing a meal with God. But then, of course, what kind of meal? Well, whatever you sacrifice, yes, you get back and you consume, right? So this is why you never want to sacrifice a blemished lamb, right? You don't want to sacrifice just something half-heartedly, right? Or something that's not perfect. You've got to care for it. You've got to love it. You've got to make sure it's perfect. It's got to be dear to you. And, and this is the most precious thing that I have, right? That I then sacrifice, right? Because if it's not precious to you, the sacrifice doesn't do anything, right? If it is blemished, then what you're going to get back is a blemished, God, right? You're not going to ingest the perfection, right, that you're sacrificing. So to sacrifice something in the Jewish system was to sacrifice the perfection, and then share a meal with Yahweh, a meal with God, which was the most intimate thing that you can do. And so I was like, okay, well, what is courage? What is strength? What is warrior? And that was the idea of the bull. So if you go back to Revelation, right, in Revelation, this is also in other the Jungian archetypes, right? The king, the warrior, the magician, the lover is also found in Revelation and Ezekiel, I think it is, where the faces, the four faces, the angel with four faces, which represents perfect being, right? So you've got the king, we have the lion, I guess, right? So you have the lion, then you have the ox or the bull, then you have the eagle, and then you have the human. So they stand for the four main values of humanity, right? So you have order, which is the kingly order. You have strength, which is the warrior, right? You've got the magician, which is wisdom, and then you have the human, which is empathy and love. And so that was the bull. I said, okay, great. Well, here's a perfect being. Here's a bull. I want to go I need a bull heart to sacrifice. So,
which fortunately you were not raising bulls at that time. This wasn't your beloved family.
So where do you get a bull's heart? So I called around to find out where in the world I can get a bull's heart. And there's a local local meat.
Shout out to Daywigs.
Daywigs up there. What is it called now? Butchery. It's like butcher shop. Yeah. So local butcher shop, and I went up there and I see, and I said, hey, do you guys need bull hearts? And without blinking, they go, sure we do. As this was the normal thing.
Yeah.
So they hand me this package, which is just enormous. I mean, this is like 4 pounds, I think. And this is just this enormous heart. And so I said, what do I do with this thing? So I put it in a cooler.
Yeah, you did not prepare us.
And I did not prepare.
There was a cooler that was carried.
We were all excited for that.
What's in the cooler? And so
what's in the box? Well, before you open the box, though, I just to close the nakedness part. I remember you allowing me to sort of participate and be like, "Hey, remember when Noah was naked? He got drunk, he got naked, and his good sons sort of walked in backwards with a cover to cover him because they honored him." And so Austin and I carried the most kingly thing we could find was a purple sheet to sort of walk backwards without looking on your nakedness to then cover you in your.
Was after the ritual though, right?
Well,
I think,
or that was after the.
You also put the cuffs on at one point.
Yeah, the leather.
I don't remember
bands,
exactly.
like Samson.
But that was after, So there was a part of that.
Oh yeah,
because
you're into the new identity.
Yeah. So there's that was after. Those are important pieces.
Yeah.
So then the action, which I so then there's the sacrifice piece. And which I had forgotten to do. I was going to stab it, but I had forgotten to do because I had this bull's heart in my hand, so I'm completely naked in the middle of the forest.
It's juicy.
Oh yeah,
it's
bloody and it was juicy, and I'm in the middle of the forest and naked, And
Austin and I don't know where to look. We're like, oh gosh, he's naked.
I knew where to
look. So much meat.
4 pounds.
oh, okay. So then,
A couple handfuls,
okay. So then, you know, so
At
then,
the bull's heart. For the record, audience. Okay.
okay. So then there is then there's something you need to say something. So they're called Lacanian full speech from Jacques Lacan, and then it goes back to Zizek. But it is that in Lacanian full speech, you're supposed to say something that is unprepared. Which again, that's the difference, ceremony and ritual. So in a ceremony, I have everything prepared. I know what I'm going to say. I say lots of things.
Yeah.
But in a ritual, you're supposed to say something that you're not prepared. You know, you're not prepared to say. You don't go in there preparing anything to say. Which again, that's why, you know, going to your ritual, right? There was, you know, you're going to stand and say something and say what you need to say at that time. But so the idea was, and I had held this bull heart up, and just something came out, right? And I couldn't even say it at first. I was just crying and just wailing, and I couldn't say it. And I began to just break down and just weep, trying to say this thing. But it was like a birth, right? I mean, there was something new that was being spoken into existence. Again, going back to, you know, just the Christian view and God speaking into existence through words. I mean, that's what's happening, right? There is a birth. There is the word is coming forth and changing the world. It is changing the symbolic order, if I want to go in that route. So it is changing something. That is greater than ourselves. That's why the presence of God or the symbolic order is necessary to be there, because you've got to speak into it and then change it. So you're actually changing what is looking down on you. Yeah. You're always kind of, you know, under the view of God, under the symbolic order, and you're always being managed by that symbolic order. So you're speaking into it and you're changing it with your words. And so that was the Lacanian full speech, is to say something that you're unprepared, that does change the symbolic order. And there's a number of other things that go with it. But so then there was the spoken word in that moment. And then that was the only thing that was spoken basically in that moment. And so it was at that moment, right, that I experienced the personal transformation. I became a new person at that moment. And why it was important for you guys to be there, right? Because again, you guys witnessed that. And so that every time I see you, right, I see myself with that new name, with that new identity. And without you saying anything, without you even mentioning anything, my name is being spoken back to me. Which is why the community is so important, right? Which is why you need to have that witnessing community all around. You need to have all of that. Again, it doesn't have to be. Here's another example of that. It doesn't have to be so dramatic. So one of my wife's.
It doesn't.
So one of
That's what I'm here for.
One of my wife's favorite experiences in church was we had gone back to see her family, and we went to a church, and this guy was talking about forgiveness. And again, she doesn't remember anything about the sermon, right? Nothing about forgiveness as a concept, forgiveness as, a 3-part sermon. So nothing is remembered in terms of what was said. But at the end of it, he actually kind of started to do a little bit of a ritual. He had these very large water basins. And what you were supposed to do at that time was to think about something that you needed forgiveness for. And so she, she remembers this vividly, is that, you clenched your hands, when you were holding on to that and meditating on what you needed forgiveness for. And you brought your clenched fists up to the front, right? And then, you dipped your hands into the water, right? And then when you were ready, right, you let your hands go, right? And again, that's almost a ritual, right? there's a part of it, right? There needs to be something spoken and within community.
Some of the elements there.
But it had a lot of the elements. And so, she still looks back on that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is one of the most profound experiences that she's had in church. Because, again, there was that aspect of the ritual component of participating in the transcendence of this piece, right?
Well, and we did Zach had his full-on wild ritual also, which you created for him, which was awesome. But then we also experimented with a much more lower stakes experience with just like the meal that we shared in couples, but we were still trying to center around this value, love and vulnerability, I think it was. So we shared a meal together. It was just something that
you helped create
that.
I helped create
that one.
You did create that one. You allowed the speaking part was where the transformation.
Yeah, and it was just, and that was actually from Brene Brown. It was just as a question of, what did you have to overcome as a child? Is one of her favorite, from in your childhood, what is something that you had to overcome? Because people can answer that super deep, or they can do it relatively surface level. But yeah, you just open up a space. And so it was doing something that people do all the time, which is share a meal together. It was like a date night thing. It was 4 couples, I believe. Yeah. But then just with a little bit of intentionality, it turned into something much more meaningful, powerful. And so that's what I feel like, is that we got to this moment where we were trying to build a community around these value experiences that were more ritualistic based, and then it kind of fell apart, and I don't know why.
And I want to say that was also sort of around the pandemic as well. In fact, I want to say that ritual may have actually preceded your ritual, if I remember correctly, which I may not.
No, or his was definitely first.
Okay, well,
I remember thinking, because that was awesome. But one, if we're going to create a community around this, it has to be something that more people would be freaked out about. And then 2, it can't always be so involved. Like it can't always, if there's going to be a rhythm, there has to be ways to experience these values in a more meaningful way. So I think I remember being an attempt at that.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, so we did it at Honeymoon.
Yeah.
Right, but it was after hours, right? It was a special place. Right? We went ahead and created that barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Right? And then there was the meal, which is the intimate experience. And then there was the sharing of the meal, and then there was the words, right, that were spoken in a very specific and designed way.
Yeah.
And there was vulnerability. I mean, I was crying, I think. I think a lot of other people were crying.
Yeah.
And just sharing this intimate moment and speaking things, right, that you weren't really prepared to speak. And saying and allowing yourself, right, to be metaphorically naked in front of other people, right? Being like, this is my pain. This is my desire. This is my want. This is my hope, right? This is my hurt. And sharing those things, not as information, right? You're not providing information. Right, you're actually experiencing something deeper than actually experiencing information, and sharing facts about each other. Right, it's not facts.
I got a question for you, and sorry if it catches you off balance.
Well, then it'll be more ritual.
Yeah, but as we're thinking through this, I'm doing some writing right now on tithing and offering, which is funny because I feel like we're learning on the Old Testament sacrificial system linked. But one of the things that I'm very discontent in the Christian world with is what we've turned offering into. Because as I learned about the Old Testament sacrificial system, it was this participatory, this sensate, this full, you even had the incense, there's music, there's chant. It was this heart, mind, soul, and strength. It was this full-bodied, embodied experience. And I feel like that's why it was so powerful and transformative, and why community was built and sustained in such a meaningful way. And now, if you think about offering, it's autodidact for churches. We don't even have to press a button, a virtual button anymore. Set it and forget it, right? Yeah. Which, okay, that's more sustainable for churches maybe, but is that doing the transformative experience that it's called to? So my question is, to kick you on that is, you're much more attuned to these conversations than I know I am, and probably Perry too. In the virtual world, which steals all of our sensate experiences, like is there our embodied experiences? Are people actively thinking about that? Are they thinking about how to incorporate these kind of like embodied experiences in the virtual world?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so it's just a part of...
Well, that encourages me, first of all.
Yeah. So, yeah, it should encourage, because if it didn't, then it would sort of... It would...
If we're
It would poke a hole. It's
yeah.
like, oh, I guess we don't need this, and we can do it all virtually, and we just be looking at screens the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So no, it's often incorporated. They incorporate sound as a participation. I've been a part of a few of these things where everyone has to like grab like a noise maker, like and bang a drum together, and there's like a little bit of a you're hearing something in the speaker, like it sounds like a mess. And and if you're by yourself, it's a little bit weird. I'm like banging a wooden spoon on my back patio with like literally dozens of people all around the world. But if you were to look over my fence, you think I'm crazy. But it created a little bit of a social death. I'm like, I don't care if I look crazy, because I'm participating with these people, and that's worth the cost, if you will, to have this sort of offering to have together. I've seen things where you're asked to sort of put your hands up in front of your camera in a way to sort of like kind of like the laying out of hands, we've experienced in church context as well.
A little more meaningful than the icon.
Yeah.
The yellow.
Wait, my hand, my little Lego hand. So there are limits to it with our technology in 2024.
But people are actively thinking.
Oh yeah, they want it. They want that. But I also think that there's something really great about that. Maybe you go and you have a season of learning how to do certain things, or getting inspired on a more cognitive or verbal dominated sort of connection with somebody. But if you're in a Zoom room with somebody and they're crying, or if you begin to cry because you've had a real emotional connection, that can be a lot more powerful than, holding hands with somebody to where the emotional depth hasn't gotten there. And in some ways, maybe they will even feel more able to be vulnerable through the safety of, well, I'm just sitting here with my screen and I can't actually be hurt. And so I'm actually going to let my guard down in a way to actually be vulnerable in a different way than I would be for somebody who's more introverted. And in person, they would sort of seize up and get out of the context. But it's not a replacement. I don't think you can have a replacement community or intimacy without getting here into our meat suits. And so that's why I'm encouraged. So I want to take this two more ways before we kind of wrap up. So if there's anything else we need to talk about with that ritual, I want to go there, and then transition into when we did expand it a little further into the couple of men's retreats that we've had, where it wasn't just ritual, it was ritual with people in our community that we've then continued to sort of see and witness, and ways that we've sort of called each other by our names and then continue to sort of do life together.
So the last part of it would be then the reabsorption into the community, right? So in other words, coming out. So the coming out is very important, as well as, the going in to the liminal space. Then you're in that disruptive space. You've said something. You've created a new self has been formed, right, through words, but it has to also be brought back into the community, right? So in other words, the coming out is very important. And again, that is typically done with just of course physical embrace as well in there. But that's where symbols are then formed. So symbols come out of that space. So here you have inside jokes, but you also could have symbols that form after that become sacred to you, that can remind you of that when you put them around your room, right? When also...
I mean, your shirt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that shirt was a symbol of an experience that you had at a concert, and you purchased it so that you're going to be able to constantly remind yourself of, I remember that.
Gosh, I think of my dad, his Native American or indigenous people. Like he was big into that culture and history, and he used to. So they used to do a sun dance where they would take animal claws and they would hook you in through your chest. And you would have to dance around until you ripped out. And when you think about the symbol, like they're literally wearing the symbol around all the time with the scars.
The scars, yeah.
And to see that yourself, but then other people seeing that, now you're a man. I can see you're a man.
So yeah, that I think
people get tattoos. I mean,
that can get us into then we can transition into the men's retreats because there's a part of that. But yeah, so then that reminds me the scars, right? The symbols, which again, going back to maybe just traditional Sunday church, I see the cross, but I never have had any, really personal transformational experience involving that cross, right? Or involving these religious symbols. So they're not personalized, right? They're not something that's built from the community, right? The community then when we meet, right, would have those symbols around, would have, we would bring something back from the forest. We would bring something back from the thing, and we would put it somewhere, right? As and then every time we would meet together as a community, right, those sacred symbols would be around to remind us of who we are as a community, of all the things that we've experienced together as a community. So those symbols,
honestly, this room has become that. For me, there's just so many things that I've taken from these different experiences to be reminded of as like, hey, can you do more? And maybe I'll have Austin leave his clothes when he gets naked. Yeah. We'll just keep them here forever.
Yeah. So with this shirt, right? For me, it's but yet that was an experience by myself, right? So in other words, it wasn't a communal experience. Mm-hmm. So they can be symbols, right, of our own histories, but it needs to have a symbol of the community, right? So the community needs to have something that's shared. So you kind of build something at the end, right? You create a painting or something, whatever it is, right? And then you hang it up on the stained glass windows. Is it some just objective picture, that somebody outside the community made, and then we bought for thousands of dollars and then said some Bible verse that, it's like, that's not representative of the community because the community didn't build it, right? And so, children's pictures, right, that you put up on the fridge, those are far more, right, meaningful than putting up some piece of beautiful art, right? It's just because the community was there. We were all there when you made that, right? You made this. It's like, so the symbols, right, are part of the end piece that can then also bring people back to that shared experience, right? So that's the idea of how the community then builds itself, is because you have this history of symbols, these histories that are all around you, right? I mean, now you have one of the things that we lack, of course, is meaning and purpose, right? Imagine being a part of a community, right? Engaging in these rituals, creating these symbols, and then going to a space that's filled with history, right? That's filled with, we've experienced all this together, right? I mean, and then that leads to even greater levels of transcendence, ecstasy, whatever, through then going, wow, this is a powerful space. I now bring expectation to that space, right? In other words, I don't just bring myself as, what am I going to get out of this? Maybe some kind of interesting piece of information or whatever it is. I'm bringing expectation that something amazing is going to happen, right? Something incredible is going to happen, reminding myself of who we are as a community, right? So you need that physical space to come back to and filled with all of those kinds of symbols, right, that you hang on the walls. And then, for me, and again, the digital place is great for, I think, like if you're older, right? So for me, I've got kids. I'm like, where do I bring my kids, right? And I don't. That's what I'm looking for, is a place to go. I want my kids, to be a part of a greater community. Where do they go? How can they be incorporated into a place? And be raised with elders who are not just me. And so that's the last piece, is the reincorporation into the community, the symbol building, which then reinvigorates the whole process.
It makes me think, to dive more into evangelical Christianity just for a second, it makes me think about how exciting it is to give testimony or to share that story, and how easy it is. Like how easy it would be for me if you're wearing your cufflinks to share with my neighbor this amazing story. I would be excited to share about that.
His story. You shared
his story. But how unexcited Western Christians are to evangelize about their faith. They don't share. And it's because what you said, they haven't built their faith community. Instead, they've had their faith given to them or pushed down on them or, told to them from here as opposed to building it up. So I was thinking about the difference between the two testimonies of the communities, of one of where I would be so excited and easy to share with these symbols present, because I've helped build this community, versus what I experience most of the time in my classic evangelical church experience.
So you
really interesting.
bring people in, and you've got, look at this, right?
Yeah.
And here's another story that I can tell you about the community,
story.
and here's another story I can tell you about the community.
Gushing about
and this is
it.
what we did here, right? And this is what happened, and and this is what you could be a part of.
Would
this.
not believe that I saw this guy eat a bull's heart.
I don't know if we could find that place again if we wanted to, honestly.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if that's part of it as well, right? You continually need to do new things, right? And you have to create new spaces. So
And that's the difficulty for me. I always want to, control issues, but it's like, I want to take that experience that we've done together. I want other people to have that same transformative, amazing experience. So I feel like where we've lacked is in the reproduction of that and the expansion of that. And, we could talk about why, 100 reasons why. But Zach, to get to where you wanted to go, he put a stake in the ground a little bit and said, we're just going to, I've been talking about these men's retreats. I've experienced them in other communities with other people, with other facilitators. It's time to do one. And you did it.
And I remember you had a conflict, and it was like a fairly minor conflict. I was so dogmatic about no, we are doing a digital detox, and this is the start time, this is the end time. And a lot of the things that you had explained to us about you protect it and you enter it. And I took that role of I had to protect the experience for the rest of us.
I would have had to be 4 hours early.
Yeah. So 90%, we'll say 90% of the experience,
But it was good. It was the right decision. It was good leadership.
Okay. Well, it's still,
because I got to do it again later. And
the second one. So Perry participated in both, and you guys both came with a little bit, more than a little bit, of sort of prerequisite experience around rituals, especially the breathwork stuff. I think both of your experience practicing the holotropic breathwork really helped the other guys to be able to understand, there's something happening here. And I think I've heard multiple people tell stories about experiencing the breathwork.
Is the witnesses?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I'm intrigued by what you're both saying right now. Of how I need to bring my kids to this. We need to expand this past whatever initial sort of container we got.
Yeah.
But at least, like I said, for me, it was modeled for me, and I got to experience it as a participant with this men's group thing. So it's okay, people say men's retreat, and things immediately come to mind. Okay, it's probably over a weekend. Only men are there. We're retreating. Maybe there's nature involved. They can wrap their heads around that. But then when you say, hey, I want to invite you to church, other things immediately pop into there.
Yeah.
And if we say, hey, you want to participate in a ritual experience with collective effervescence, then they probably
got nothing.
Sideways as well. They call the police. So but you say, hey, do you want to have dinner? Sure. They know what a dinner is. And you say, hey, we're going to have kind of an intentional dinner. And that's sort of been most recent step for me and Jessica. And honestly, it's been the return to Christ, if you will, facing Christ. I can't call myself a Christian yet, but I'm looking towards Christ now. And that has reawakened a connection with Jessica and myself.
Huh.
Not honestly, we're in a really good spot before that as well.
Yeah.
But now it also sort of reawakened something in her and her relationship with God, where it was like, here's Jessica just sort of cruising along, got a good relationship with God, and then here's Zach. Like, I'm an atheist, I don't believe any of this shit, and then giving up atheism for Lent, having a couple of these super powerful experiences, and then all of a sudden I'm not actually over her, but I am like so into God that she's like, oh, I've actually been neglecting my relationship with God in a certain way. And so she had a different path to kind of get back there.
Yeah.
And like, oh, we do have a table. We have a house. We have a big house because we had a whole bunch of kids and now we're closer to empty nest. And so it's like, all right, let's invite Perry and his child, or all children. We had one child that came to us that time, and it worked. And, we invited you and your children, and we're hoping that works this week as well. So I appreciate what you said about it not having to be so dramatic. Like, this needs to be something we can actually integrate into our lives and invite people into participating with, and be open to what they sort of bring to it as well. And like, Julie was just, she brought so much. Everyone talks about how amazing she was. And I'd had maybe a couple interactions with her before, and because she's one of five, she fits in the mix into her birth order and plays the
middle one too, right?
She's the middle, right? But there, she was Dad's only child, and she was amazing,
and she loved it, and she wants to go back.
Well, we're not having it without her. So.
Well, same way with Ruben and the car washing, right?
Oh yeah.
The participatory nature is so incredibly vital,
right,
to faith formation.
But because family is so important to all of us, that intergenerational, whatever it needs to be, that's sensitive to the maybe shorter attention spans of kids, or the desire for fun for kids, and maybe the desire for
the extreme skepticism of the trappings. My daughter's older; she's 22. I almost start like she's rejecting Christianity not because of the actual foundations of Christianity, but because of her experience of Christians in the church.
But she's down to come to dinner.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, it's the participatory nature that is, and she'll have faith conversations with me and my wife Chandra, or other people that she loves and respects, and then she would sit around and she'll probably watch this podcast, send it to her, and she'll probably be really interested in this conversation. So, but yeah, we're into a very interesting whatever's next or emerging, where people are not as antagonistic to things anymore as they maybe were over the last 30, 40 years. The people who don't believe, even. Whereas there used to be so much contention and antagonism directed at it. Now it's just like, don't give me the trappings of Christianity and the ceremonies and the jargon and the package, the slick, but I'm still interested in whatever transformative experience, if you can help me get there. That's what I'm sensing anyways, from the next generation and from peers even, for sure.
Yeah, so I think, and with the men's retreat, I think you were able to show this, is that, the question is it scalable? And I think it is scalable, because you can design these rituals. So one of the kind of hopes that I have maybe in the future is, like a database, or, just a whole websites of people who have designed these that you can go to, right? That maybe are set on certain values, and you go ahead and go, okay, with this value, these people have attempted, and designed this ritual, right? So therefore, great. We can do that as our community, right? In other words, we can go ahead and have somebody else design that and share the ones that have been incredibly successful, share the growing pains, the things that they have learned, and it's no longer a centralized source of information. Because again, that's the problem with the bullseye model. You've got a centralized source of information that is doctrine, right? That is, I have to assent to some doctrine, and doctrine is divisive. And so, there to me, right, we can go ahead and gather, and we don't have to worry about, do I believe X, Y, Z to participate, right? I can scale this across the world, across, multiple sites that are independently operated, right? So it's not like one big, mega church that has all these sites. This can be decentralized, and you can have those ritual elders come together and say, look at this data, boom, we got this database, let's try this, right?
Even the mentor-tree thing, it wasn't.
And that's what I'm saying.
Was sort of
you replicated it.
Yeah. I don't have the blessing of somebody. I didn't have to buy into get a license. Hey, I'm a licensee. Like the tenements. We put on a tenement in our community. You have to have the blessing, the sanctification. At the Church of Ted, not that Ted.
Right.
But with this, it was just the spirit of what I experienced seemed replicable, and the calling I felt was our community. Men in my community, men I care for need this, and men I don't even know yet need this. And this is my calling to fulfill.
But at some point, we will monetize it so we can get rich off it.
Oh yeah, I mean for sure. All right. Well,
so I think this going back to maybe your atheism for Lent piece as well. I think that was one of the things that, and myself included, my post-Christian experience. And that's where, again, the Zizek helped me out, and maybe, you have their experiences helping you out. There still needs to be, right, I don't think, and this is why maybe a non-religious or non-faith community doesn't quite work in terms of organizing it. I still think it has to be a faith community because you've got to tap into something larger than yourself in your little community. And if you can tap into, Christianity, right, and you can tap into, this source, and at the center of Christianity, we were singing it today, right? I mean, and I love that part of it, which is something about, the center of Christianity, Jesus. What does the name of Jesus mean? Self-sacrificial love, right? And there is no better way to build a community than self-sacrificial love. And so when you have self-sacrificial love at the center of your community, right, and you've got this history and this, great, just, stories and texts and traditions that you can tap into. You don't have to tap into all the nitty-gritty doctrinal pieces, right? But you need something that is older, deeper, center. Yeah. And the beauty of Christianity is at the center of Christianity is a crucified God, right? There isn't a positive physical being at the center of Christianity. There's an empty space, right? And then that empty space allows for, right, that freedom, right, to exist within that community. And so that's why I think it has to be, for me personally, it has to still be a Christian community. Otherwise it doesn't have a center. We have humanistic, humanism worship, right? I went to one, right, where we worshipped at Lorna Shore, right, and it was phenomenal, right?
But you're not going back there again, and you're not building relationships.
Exactly.
People, and you're not,
So I'm not building a local relationship. I'm not building a relationship that can also not only
be sustained.
Yeah, and also not only that, and I can, I guess I can go to, to be sustained. So it's free to be a sustained community. It has to still be birthed in Christianity. This is what maybe why I referred to that aspect before is, you need a different view of Christianity and as opposed to some, absolute truth God out here somewhere. But I think that's why it never kind of worked before, is because I don't think you can just throw out these values and have these experiences and go, great, we now have a community of personal transformation. Again, you could put a lot of effort into it and get pretty far, right? but it's still not centering. Again, going back to the religious piece, everyone has a religion, right? So you have to answer the question, what happens when you die, right? You have to answer these questions on how to solve this prisoner's dilemma. So it has to be a religious community, right? And there's not that many religions, right, that are there. And we are in, the Western world, right? We're in Evansville, right? But we're in a Christian community. Go back to Jordan Peterson, right? I mean, the traditions, right? The makings of this world that we exist in is from Christian roots,
and that's being recognized well beyond Christian thinkers. That's just a sociological reality. I mean, people are non-believers are writing books on that. It's just.
Have we talked about Tom Holland yet?
A little bit today.
Ever?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's the one that's definitely coming to mind on this. Still doesn't call himself a Christian, but definitely calls himself a Christian in terms of how his and all of our values in the West were formed and maintained.
Yeah.
And so I think there still has to be that, religious center, right, of the community. Now, I don't think it can be a non-faith community. It has to be a centered religious community. And it, to me, centered on Christianity, at least for me to be able to participate. Which is why I'm excited of you giving up atheism for Lent.
And Orthodox Lent is still happening, so I'm staying with it.
You're
staying with it because we're still at Orthodox Lent. And I actually, the priest that invited me into the Orthodox Church reached out on Facebook because people had sent him the message. They were like, I think this guy's talking about you. And he's invited me to Orthodox Easter, which starts at 10 o'clock at night. And there's a pinnacle at midnight, and there's food and feasting. He said it's their best event of the year. I'm guessing that I'm allowed to also invite you to participate in that. You want me to double check?
Don't know.
I don't know yet.
I can't.
I've been to that.
To that event.
So not
to
Easter. I've been into the church.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about just this event at at 10 o'clock Easter thing. So,
well, and while you're on this journey, just putting this out there. There's Easter and Resurrection, but then there's 40 days of the sites of Jesus that's celebrated in the Ascension. So
is that called the
where
then
then he is then Lord over all the universe. So
just give me all the 40-day things.
40 days. You got 40 more days if you want to continue on this journey. At the end of which you can culminate with ascending to. He's the Lord of the throne.
Oh, you said ascending, and I heard ascending.
Yeah, both.
Heaven.
Yeah, both. Yeah. No, heaven is right here.
There you go. Ascending to ascend and just in this eminent space. Yeah. All right. Well, so the two things. So first is, I want to call you to either start or restart your own YouTube channel. I'm just feeling that there's just, because we brought Austin in, but it was still you're still the source of so much of this.
Oh yeah.
And I've had people reach out to me. They're like, who is this Perry guy? Where has he been hiding? And I was like, well, we're all hiding in Evansville, Indiana, but so that's the one thing. So I want to just say, I think there's juice there. And then the last part is just, I love you guys. We have a good thing here.
Yeah, I agree.
So to me, that's the juice for me, right? In other words, I want to share this more with us, right? In other words, and maybe there is somebody out there who wants to help us start this, because we always have lacked the optimizer. Going back to,
we sure have the ambassador.
Going back to the
profile problem solving.
We've always lacked an optimizer.
Right, so optimizer, if you're
obviously generator, conceptualizer, implementer. We're missing the optimization. And
because we've implemented some things, right?
Yeah, we've
generated some things, right? Conceptualized things.
Brings all.
We don't optimize. We don't have the repetition, the optimization. And
it's how do you
make
that thing really, really well work?
Yes.
That's what optimization
somebody wants
does.
to help us make it work.
Well, and in case they're confused on that, I'll even pitch the first episode. I want to hear I want to watch through my screen you two having a conversation about that whole process, and church. I want to watch you guys have that and not participate. Even though I like participating, I'd like to watch you guys having that conversation. So that's the call.
We're incomplete without you. There's
I'll put my hands on the screen.
The triune friendship.
I'll get a cut out of my self-like's head and put it in front of you. Or you can have it at honeymoon. You know, the spirit of honeymoon would prevail. So, all right, that's it.
Peace.